Justin asked solemnly, "What's happened?" Lawrence explained, "A guest passed out in the lobby. The lobby manager says he stopped breathing. They've already dialed 911. A doctor happened to be nearby, so they're currently giving him first aid." Justin groaned. He knew the hotel would be held responsible if something were to happen. After all, Hotel Finest's guests were rich and important. They were used to finding someone to blame. "This is the last thing we need right now." He instructed Lawrence, "Go and take a look. Make sure we're doing everything we can." "Yes, sir." After Lawrence had gone, Justin walked out of the study and found that his son was no longer in the living room. He asked, "Where's Pete?" The nanny replied, "He went next door." Oh no. Justin had a bad feeling about this. "I'd better go and see what my silly brother and the kid are up to now." In the suite next door, Chester pointed to a mountain of clothes piled up on the sofa and announced, "These are for you." Cherry exclaimed, "All of them?" "Yep, I went to a few stores and bought one of each design in your size." Chester circled around a few times, holding up different bits of clothing, and asked, "Can you try not to be on my back so much all the time in the game now?" Cherry looked up at her poor uncle and blinked. "I'll try." Whenever she started playing, she transformed into a little ogre. "I can't help it, and it's not my fault you're so rubbish at it either," she thought snidely as she began rummaging through the clothes. She came across a pink princess tutu dress and pulled it out of the pile. "I must have bought that by mistake." Chester reached over to set the dress aside, but he saw the child's eyes light up. "This is beautiful." Chester was perplexed. Cherry ran off, all giddy with delight. "I'm going to try it on." She'd had to dress like a tomboy every day in order to convince everyone she was Pete and he was her. It had seriously impaired her looks. She ran into the bedroom, quickly changed into the dress, and looked at herself admiringly in the mirror. "That's more like it." Her cell phone suddenly rang. She picked up. "Hi, Pete." "We have to switch back right away, Cherry. You used Dad's phone to send that email just now, so I've got to remove the traces, otherwise he'll find out. And our plan won't work if he does." "Okie dokie." Cherry slipped out of the bedroom. She was just about to leave when she saw Justin through the suite's open door. "Oh no, he's coming over." She panicked. "Pete, I'm at Uncle Chester's, but Daddy's coming over now." They hadn't hung up yet, and it was just as well. Pete thought quickly. He was hiding in the stairwell and stuck his head out to see where his dad was. "If Daddy takes Cherry away with him, we'll probably have to wait for ages for another chance to switch back. But I need to remove the evidence of that email now, or he's sure to find out." Pete decided to wager on his uncle's IQ. He darted out of the stairwell and called out, "Daddy!" Justin, who'd been about to knock, was taken aback for a moment. He glanced over at the source of the voice and saw Pete standing by the stairs in a princess dress. The sight shocked Justin. Wordlessly, he grabbed his son and took him back to their suite. Once they'd gone inside, Cherry quietly opened the door, ran to the stairwell, and fled downstairs, holding her dress up so she didn't trip. Chester was stunned. Pete's gone home in a princess dress. His feet felt like they were stuck to the ground. Oh no. He suddenly thought of something and rushed next door in a panic. "I'm really in for it now." "Justin, I was the one that bought the dress, but listen to me, it's not what you're thinking." Justin slammed the door shut in Chester's face and gritted his teeth as he said, "Stay away from my son." Chester was lost for words. "But I'm innocent. Let me explain." After shutting out the culprit that was to blame for all of this, Justin turned back to look at his son and observed him seriously. Pete was wearing a princess dress, and there was a pink headband on his naturally wavy short hair. His exquisite facial features, the smooth and practiced way he combed that Barbie's hair today, the chatter, the new liveliness. Justin could no longer ignore the doubts forming in his mind, and he asked, "Are you really my son?" Pete nodded seriously. Justin asked, "What did I get you for your birthday when you were 3? Pete was silent for a moment before he answered, "2 books, French for Kids, First 100 Words, and Introduction to Programming." "How much Christmas money did Grandma give you last year?" $200. Pete couldn't help feeling a little bad at his dad looking so unsure of himself. He tugged on his dress and said, "I'll go and change." Pete watched his son enter the bedroom. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. He walked over and pushed the door open. It really was his son. He hadn't been replaced. He was so relieved, but he also found himself feeling a little disappointed. How reassuring it would have been if the child spending time with me before had been a daughter instead. Pete turned to see Justin staring at him. Their eyes met, and the two of them looked at each other in silence for a few long moments. At last, Pete frowned and said, "What are you doing?" He walked out into the living room disdainfully. "Daddy, you should see a psychiatrist. You can't watch people in the bathroom." Downstairs in the lobby, Nora hurried over to the man who'd collapsed. He was motionless, and with a quick assessment showed he'd stopped breathing. She was momentarily distracted by a familiar voice. "I'm a medical student. Step aside. I'll perform CPR on him." Of course, Angela had also rushed over. She has to be the center of attention, doesn't she? Angela took out a piece of paper to cover the man's mouth and immediately started to perform CPR. It was obvious at first glance that the man who'd collapsed was wealthy. If I save him, I'll definitely be handsomely rewarded, Angela thought selfishly. However, after even 2 minutes of chest compressions, the man showed no response. Nora pushed her aside. "Let me take a look." Angela frowned, yelling angrily, "What for? Nora, you're not a doctor. Don't waste time that I should be using to save him." Nora quickly pressed down on the man's chest a few times. She was able to diagnose a problem immediately. He was experiencing tension pneumothorax. This was an acute condition. Nora thought fast. Fluid is accumulating in the chest, so performing CPR is useless. By the time the ambulance comes, it will probably be too late. He needs immediate chest drainage. When she saw that Nora was ignoring her, Angela shouted even more angrily, "I get it now. Are you trying to curry favor because he looks important? Come on, take her away. Don't waste time that I can use to save him. I can't continue with CPR if she's here." The middle-aged woman kneeling next to the collapsed man looked at Nora when she heard Angela's words. She said, "You're not a doctor. Then get away from my husband." Nora didn't listen. She stood up and rushed over to the front desk. She asked them for the first aid kit and a sharp knife from the bar. She wasted no time rushing back over to the man once they'd found what she needed. She pulled on a pair of the gloves from the kit, and then grabbing the rubbing alcohol to sterilize the blade of the knife as well as she could. Then, she pulled the man's shirt open, pressed down on the mid-clavicular line of his second intercostal space, and plunged the knife down without further hesitation. Blood spurted from the wound, scaring everyone around them. They all backed away. The man on the ground was still unresponsive. "Murder! Murder!" Angela shouted triumphantly. "Call the cops! Arrest her!" She couldn't believe her luck. I've tried everything possible to get rid of that awful woman, but I didn't expect her to actually self-destruct. But the next moment, Angela's smug expression froze. The crowd around them had been getting increasingly agitated, and the man's wife was beside herself, shouting, "What are you doing? What have you done to him? How could you?" But the next moment, the man, who'd been motionless until now, started breathing again. A stunned hush fell over the crowd. As the ambulance hadn't arrived yet, Nora took out an infusion tube from the first aid kit and inserted one end into the patient's chest cavity. She inserted the other end into the finger of a latex glove. She cut an opening slightly smaller than 1/2 an inch wide on the end. This would act as a flap to allow air from inside the chest cavity to be easily discharged, while preventing air from outside from entering. The man's breathing gradually became steadier. "He's alive! He's alive!" The people around them started clapping and cheering, and the man's wife heaved a sigh of relief. She fell to the ground as if she'd just narrowly escaped death herself, repeating, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Nora remained expressionless, watching over her patient. "He'll be fine once the ambulance arrives and takes him to hospital." She stood up to leave, but Angela yelled sharply, "Thank you?" Simple CPR would have saved him, but she insisted on operating on him instead. Everyone turned to look at her. "What?" Angela took out her student ID and said, "I'm a senior med student, and I'm about to go for my internship." This gentleman here obviously just lost consciousness temporarily and went into shock. CPR would have been enough to resuscitate him. She turned to berate her sister. Nora, how could you do something so drastic? You have no idea what you're doing. We're not in a hospital, in case you hadn't noticed. Operations have to be performed in sterile conditions. Do you have any idea how many germs and bacteria there are around here? What if the wound you made becomes infected? The man's wife wasn't falling for Angela's nonsense. But CPR didn't work, even when you tried for so long. It was this young lady here that helped my husband to breathe again. Angela sneered. CPR needs time for the effects to show. How can he possibly get better in 2 minutes? If she hadn't stopped me, your husband would have been totally fine by now, and he wouldn't have a hole in his chest. The man's wife frowned. She didn't know much about medicine, so she was getting less sure who was right. Angela continued. She's not even a doctor. She's probably watched a few episodes of some medical show and thinks she knows what she's doing. The woman looked at her husband, who was still lying on the ground, his breathing steady. Then she looked at Nora uncertainly and asked, Are you really not a doctor? Nora thought this whole argument was ridiculous. Does it matter whether I'm a doctor? Surely the point is he's still alive. Angela replied aggressively, Of course it matters. He didn't need to be operated on. It's all because you pretended to know more than you actually do. Everything will be clear once the ambulance gets here. Nora needed to get out of there. Unless I expose my identity as Athena, these people will never believe me, no matter what I say, and I really can't take that risk. Angela scoffed and said, You'd better not be thinking of leaving. Stay here and prove your innocence. If you're so sure you've done the right thing. Mom, I'd advise you to call the police now. This is assault. At that moment, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics carried a stretcher down. A doctor had followed them to the hotel, and they all rushed over to the patient. After performing a full-body examination, the doctor asked grimly, Who performed first aid on him? Angela's face lit up. She pointed at Nora as she answered, She's the one that did that. She's just an idiot who's never even went to school. How dare she operate on someone? The doctor's expression became hesitant when she said that. He asked, She's never even studied. Where did she learn her medical skills then? Before Nora could reply, Angela spoke again. She scoffed. She's probably just blindly copied something she saw on TV. Doctor, it's illegal to treat someone's illness without proper knowledge, right? A look of astonishment appeared on the doctor's face. Stunned, he asked Nora, How can you have performed such a flawless chest drainage operation, out in the field no less, when you haven't even studied medicine professionally? And you're so young, too. You must be a genius. Angela's triumphant expression disappeared. What? A genius? There's no way Nora's a genius. What's he talking about? Nora smiled slightly. Angela's ranting and raving meant she'd not needed to reveal anything after all. My secret's safe. But any doctor with a bit of common sense would know what to do. How does that make me a genius? Next to them, the man's wife heard their conversation and understood. She said, Doctor, about my husband's condition. We would have treated him in the same way at the hospital. It's just that the equipment would have been more professional. There aren't any chest drainage bottles here, so she could only make do like she did. He's very lucky she was here, and that operation was done in time. Otherwise, due to his inability to breathe, his internal organs would have suffered damage from oxygen deprivation. Much longer, and he would never have woken up. After the doctor finished his explanation, he got the paramedics to carry the patient to the ambulance. It was only after the man's wife got into the ambulance that she realized she hadn't thanked her husband's savior yet. She turned to search for her, but there was no sign of the woman among the crowd. By the time Lawrence reached the lobby, the ambulance had left. After hearing about everything that had happened from the service staff, Lawrence asked, Do you know who the patient was? They replied, It was Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson? Lawrence's eyes widened. He quickly picked up his cell phone and called Justin. Mr. Hunt, this is terrible. The emergency in the lobby was someone who'd collapsed. He needed emergency surgery. It was Simon Anderson. Justin immediately said, I'm coming down. The Andersons and the Hunts were friends, and their families had been close for generations. He would head to the hospital and offer his support. He went to the study to check on Pete, who was reading. He seemed to have reverted to his taciturn temperament. He told his son he needed to go out, and then he left to head downstairs. Before stepping out of the suite, he wordlessly picked up the dress that his son had set aside and tossed it into the trash. When Justin arrived in the hospital, Simon was still being operated on. His wife, Melissa Anderson, sat on the bench outside the operating room, her face full of worry. Justin walked over and greeted her. "Melissa." Her eyes reddened when she saw him. She said, "He rushed over here to California because he heard that someone had news about his eldest sister. But then he heard his eldest sister may have died 23 years ago and only left a daughter behind. He got so upset he almost died." More than 20 years ago, the Andersons' eldest daughter had run away from home. She'd disappeared, and there'd been no trace of her since. Over the years, the Andersons had been searching for her everywhere. Justin consoled her and said, "Simon will be fine. I've already spoken to the doctors. They said that he received timely treatment, so he's not in danger anymore. He's been very lucky." Melissa remembered the woman. "Justin, it was a young lady that saved Simon today. We're deeply indebted to her. Can you find out who she is? When Simon's condition stabilizes, I'd like to pay her a visit and thank her." Justin nodded. "Of course, anything you need." Justin waited at the hospital with Melissa until the operation was over and Simon's condition stabilized. Then he returned to the hotel with Lawrence. "Mr. Hunt, let's go straight to the control room and check the cameras. Hopefully, we'll find the identity of that kind soul."
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.